Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a real classic this time, David Copperfield.
Oh, Dickens, a fantastic choice, truly.
And I know it's one of those books some folks have on their to-read list forever. It's a bit daunting, I get it. But this deep dive, we're zeroing in on something special.
Right, not just the whole epic tale.
Exactly. It's those early chapters often overlooked that are pure gold. Dickens, he was a master of drawing you in, and he does it by showing us the world through young David's eyes, how he sees grief, how he deals with all the upheaval life throws at him, even as a kid.
And he does this, of course, through the unreliable narrator. Right off the bat, we're seeing everything as young David experiences it, limited understanding and all. Makes for some truly unique interpretations.
Okay, so for our listeners, break that down. Why is an unreliable narrator so darn interesting?
Well, imagine this. We're getting the story from little David, not some older, wiser version. So it's raw, unfiltered, might not always be accurate, mind you.
Like when he's going on about babies born on Friday being unlucky, he wasn't even there, but tells it like it's gospel.
Exactly. That's pure innocent David, trying to piece together this huge world with what little he knows. As readers, we're pulled right into his world, feeling that confusion and wonder right along with him.
And Dickens, he nails that childlike view through his descriptions, vivid, almost like you're feeling it. The chickens in the yard, scary to him, the storeroom full of shadows, even that peaceful green churchyard where his father's buried, it's all so immediate.
It's deceptive how much those simple descriptions tell us. For a child, everything's bigger, more mysterious. That's the lens David's looking through, and it sets the scene for how he'll handle the heavier stuff later on, like real grief.
Because he does face loss in various forms, doesn't he? His dad's death, before David's even born, it casts this long shadow.
And Dickens portrays that lingering sadness so well, a constant presence, but not overwhelming. It's just part of David's world, this ache he doesn't fully grasp.
But then there's losing his mother, too, in a way. Not through death, but her marriage to Mr. Murdstone, that's a whole other ballgame, right?
Absolutely. His dad's death is this distant sorrow, but his mother changing, that's immediate, confusing for young David. He sees her affection shifting, this new man there, heartbreaking.
Makes me think of the contrast. David at his father's grave, quiet, reflective. Then there's the scene where he sees his mother being affectionate with Murdstone. Two types of loss, both hitting him hard.
And that leads us to Murdstone's entrance, and that striking image of the Sweetbriar fence. It's there when he first appears, pops up again when he's walking with David's mother.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's like this chill settles over the garden. Even Peggotty, usually so warm towards David, she changes.
That simple image, Dix uses it to represent something bigger. The Sweetbriar becomes this barrier, literally, between the happy home David had and Murdstone pushing his way in.
It's amazing how objects can mean so much, especially to a kid. And talking of Murdstone being controlling, there's that word Dickens uses for him and Miss Murdstone. Firmness.
Firmness sounds good on the surface, but with them, it's a weapon, dressed up all nice. It's how they control, stifle joy, individuality, even simple kid stuff.
Like when Miss Murdstone takes the household keys. Seems minor, but it speaks volumes.
Power shift, plain and simple. She's in charge now, silencing David's mother in the process. Chilling.
It's scary how much Dickens conveys with so little. We're only a few chapters in, but you feel this sense of dread building.
Exactly. It makes you want to protect David, even though we're just watching this unfold.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's this other thing I want to mention.
It's like Dickens is dropping these little hints, these tiny details that tell us so much about what's to come later. Like, I keep thinking about David's descriptions of Murdstone's eyes.
Oh, absolutely, those eyes.
Yeah.
They're practically a character in themselves.
Right. He keeps focusing on them, calling them shallow, black, even disfigured at one point. It's creepy.
It's like young David can sense there's something deeply wrong with Murdstone, even if he doesn't have the words for it yet. He's picking up on something sinister beneath the surface.
And Dickens does this throughout the early chapters, doesn't he? Creates this atmosphere of unease, like something bad is brewing. That trip to Yarmouth, for instance. On the surface, it's a pleasant outing, but even then, David picks up on this underlying tension.
Oh, completely. That trip is a perfect example of how Dickens uses setting to build suspense. Remember how David notices those subtle cues from Murdstone's business associates? They're practically terrified of him.
It's like they're walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do the wrong thing.
Exactly. And then, to make matters worse, we have the introduction of Mr. Quinion and Mr. Passnidge. Talk about unsettling character.
Oh, those two. They're like Murdstone's henchmen, larger-than-life figures who embody everything that's oppressive and controlling about him.
And that bizarre toast they make, confusion to Brooks of Sheffield. What on earth does that even mean?
Right. It's this nonsensical phrase, but it feels vaguely threatening, especially with David sitting right there.
Like they're playing some kind of cruel game that David doesn't understand. And that sense of displacement, of not belonging, it only gets worse when they return home and David discovers his room has been changed.
That always struck me as such a poignant detail. It's a small change, but it speaks volumes.
It's Murdstone asserting his dominance, invading even the most private spaces in David's life. And then, to really drive the point home, he brings in that terrifying guard dog.
Oh, don't remind me about that dog. Deep-mouthed and black-haired, David says. Sounds like Murdstone himself.
It's like a physical manifestation of Murdstone's oppressive presence, always watching, always lurking.
It's no wonder David feels like he's suffocating in that house. His childhood is slowly being chipped away, bit by bit. And then, of course, there are the dreaded lessons.
Ah, yes, the lessons. They're less about education and more about control. Murdstone and Miss Murdstone are determined to mold David in their image, whether he likes it or not.
It's about breaking his spirit, forcing him to conform. And Dickens makes it clear that this approach to discipline is going to have disastrous consequences.
Oh, absolutely. We see David's anxiety increasing, his self-esteem plummeting. It's painful to watch as a reader because you know it's only a matter of time before something snaps.
And that moment comes when David, desperate for his mother's comfort, runs to her for a hug.
It's such a natural human response. He's a child who's been through so much, and he just wants his mother's love.
And that's exactly what Murdstone uses against him.
I know, it's awful. He demands that Clara be firm, forcing her to withhold the affection and reassurance that David so desperately needs.
It's heartbreaking. He's basically weaponizing Clara's love against her own child.
And it's a turning point in the narrative.
Hmm.
From that moment on, there's no doubt in the reader's mind that Murdstone is a truly cruel and manipulative individual.
And that's where things take that really dark turn. When Murdstone actually strikes David, it's like any doubt we had about him being cruel, it vanishes. Dickens makes you face that violence head on.
There's no sugarcoating it. It shatters the illusion of Murdstone's firmness being well-intentioned. This is about power, plain and simple. And for David, it's not just the physical pain, is it?
No, it goes so much deeper than that. It's the betrayal, the sense of being utterly powerless and alone. And what's worse, his mother is forced to stand there and watch. She can't protect him.
It's a reminder that abuse thrives in silence.
Mm.
Clara, for all her good intentions, she's trapped too.
Exactly. And David, as much as he tries to understand what's happening, he's just a kid. He doesn't have the tools to process this kind of trauma. It makes you think about the lasting impact of these early experiences, how they shape who we become.
Absolutely. And Dickens, he doesn't shy away from those complexities. He shows us how these events ripple outward, affecting everyone in their orbit.
And yet, amidst all this darkness, there's still this glimmer of hope, wouldn't you say? David's spirit, his resilience, it shines through. Think about his love for storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. It's his refuge, his way of making sense of a world that feels increasingly chaotic and frightening. Through stories, he finds his voice, his strength.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we have the power to create our own light. And that, I think, is the beauty of David Copperfield. It's a story about survival, about finding your way through the darkness.
It's a story that continues to resonate with readers because it speaks to something universal within us, that desire to overcome adversity, to find meaning and connection in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I think it's important for our listeners to keep that in mind as they journey on with David. Don't be afraid to connect with his vulnerability, his strength, his determination to make sense of the world around him.
And pay attention to those little details, those seemingly insignificant moments that Dickens sprinkles throughout the narrative.
Ugh.
They often hold the key to unlocking deeper layers of meaning and understanding.
Because ultimately, David Copperfield is a story about the resilience of the human spirit. It's about finding light in the darkness and emerging from adversity stronger and more self-aware. And that's a message worth holding on to. So until next time, happy reading, everyone.